Hello, everyone. Will Gasper, Hospice of Michigan, grief support counselor in Cadillac. And just wanted to give you, gentlemen, and anybody else who shows up to view this recording, a recap of our discussion this last Tuesday, October 5th at 6 p.m. We started off continuing the list that we actually started working on from an article that we had read over and discussed back in September, the first week of September, the first Tuesday of September. And that article has caused a lot of discussion, very profound and deep discussions among our group. So this topic that we covered on Tuesday started off with resistance versus resiliency. And the first guy talked about that he wished to understand what lies ahead. He wished he could know what lies ahead. But he's found out through trial and error about 1 year into his grief journey that he has to live in the moment because the past is history, the future is a mystery, and that's why they call the moment today the present. So, like all men that we talk to in this group twice a month on Tuesdays at 6 p.m., first and third, memories versus misery. Most of the men have that ongoing battle where misery wins over for the first 6 to 8 months. And then if each man or each person is lucky, memories start winning over the day-to-day thinking that our group members go through. People often ask our group members, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do in 5 years? Where are you going to be in 5 years? One guy responded to that, says, hell, I don't know what I'm doing 4 hours from now. I only live for the moment. And sure, it would be nice to make plans, but certainly the statement that what good are plans when we have nobody to plan them with or to make them with. And that had a lot of head nods, people understanding that it's not quite, and this never can be, as enjoyable to make plans for the future if you don't have anyone to make those plans with. So that's why living for today was the resounding sentiment for each of our members that showed up on Tuesday night. Some would say or ask themselves, what would my spouse say? What would my spouse want me to do? And several of the gentlemen talked about that before their wives passed, they told them, you've got to go on. I'm sorry, I have no control over my illness, over my cancer, over whatever condition took them down. But they would ask their spouse before they died, please, please take care of yourself. Please move on. I'll wait for you. And obviously those are spouses with a strong and deep faith that they will again see each other someday. And then there's another gentleman that talks about isolation. And there was a lot of head nods about even in a crowded room, men, or especially this one that told about his experience, even in a crowded room, you feel lonely. And there's a difference between aloneness and being lonely and experiencing loneliness. Aloneness is, to his description, was more of a choice, where loneliness was not a choice. It just was there. Before our COVID experience, which we're still going through, by the way, changed everything, people who were grieving were often alone after all the hoopla or the planning of the funeral or the celebration was over. After the estate was settled, so to speak, affairs put in order, there was isolation. But COVID has made that even more pronounced. It's not only a physical isolation, but it's a emotional isolation. A lot of that comes from not their choice. Sure, maybe in the beginning, but as their search for coming out of that isolation kind of took over their desire to get out and experience life again somewhat at their own pace, of course, that they realized that there was an emotional isolation as well. And that all stems from folks that didn't have a spouse die on them for whatever reason, couldn't explain or couldn't understand what these gentlemen were going through. Yes, there was a lot of agreement that this is a club that you don't want to belong to. But if you fall into that situation, you are in the club and you will be able to relate totally to what other club members that have lost their spouse has gone through. And that's where the power in sharing comes from a total understanding of what that experience was or is still ongoing. So from that, we moved on to a basket of regrets, where to a man, every member that spoke about having a basket of regrets, things that were said, that were not said, that should have been said. And it was reminded to the group that there is no perfect husband out there. Not one of us that attended Tuesday night could say that we were perfect or are perfect. And there's no perfect wife or spouse. We all are human. We all say things in the heat of the moment that we most usually often regret. Or perhaps we kind of sulk and we stonewall we don't say we're sorry soon enough. Maybe a day or two, maybe more, before the passionate and the emotional wall that we put up brings us back to reality. And if two people can forgive each other, two people that love each other can say, I'm sorry, and the other could respond, you're forgiven. Let's work on this so it doesn't happen again. Then that's love, gentlemen. It's often said that we hurt the ones that we love the most. We hurt them the most because we know they're safe. We're safe with them. And so often the apologies come too late. And that burden carries very, very heavy load after a spouse dies. And that's why most of men, and I'm sure women do it too, but since this is a men's group, we're going to focus on what men think. And most men that I've talked to, most men in our group have regrets about things that were said, things that were left unsaid, that should have been talked about, that should have been spoken. So, gentlemen, that pretty much wraps up what we talked about. It got very, very deep and very, very profound in our discussion on Tuesday, with about 11 men showing up again and having that discussion. So we invite you to return on October 19th, when Wes and David will roll out a new idea, some new teaching, and Matt and I will be back the first Tuesday of November at 6 p.m. Thank you again for tuning in. Feel free, please, to email myself at wgasper@hom.org or wlawton, WLAWTON, or David Keller, dkeller@hom.org. And we'd be glad to converse with you and invite you back to the next Men Overcoming Loss. Until then, take care, gentlemen.